that'll work. I'm going to be kind of quiet for this because it's late. My roommate is still up right now, though, because I believe he works late tomorrow. I think both of them work late. Or, well, the one roommate can't really hear me from his room. I try to be respectful for the one in the next room over, but he's still up, so I'm not terribly concerned about it. I don't have a particular idea for this read. I'm just going to go with whatever comes out. Just wanted to get one more in, one while I still have time. I don't know if I'm working. I'm working tomorrow all day, but I don't know about the following day. So, just in case, I want to make sure that I'm just getting some stuff done. Okay. We're just going to start. We're going to start with A. We've got the Ten of Wands in the upright, the Lord of Oppression. The Lord of Oppression. The first time I read this card in this deck, it was incredibly deep and incredibly thorough. What I'm getting on top of this one, what I'm getting from this one right now is, right off the bat, fairly simplistic. There is a duality that is blocking one's passions, one's concepts, potentially even one's integrity, but really not integrity of maybe one's morality, but the integrity of one's actions, in the sense that, it's like you can put your very best energy into something, and you can even do really good work. But if you're doing, okay, I'm a maid, right? So, let's say that I go to a house and I just put, 200% into cleaning this house, and I clean it better than I've ever cleaned another house in my life. But it's the wrong house, right? Then it doesn't really matter how good the clean was, does it? Which is unfair, seemingly, but it's not unfair. It's actually entirely fair. It's just a reminder that it's important to always be aware of one's surroundings, and in alignment with what one knows to be right for the individual, in order to make sure that you're not putting your energy into places that aren't good for you, aren't right. It's not even aren't good for you. You learned a lesson. It serves some purpose, but it wasn't the right house. And now you're 3 hours behind schedule and that exhausted, and you're still going to have to go clean the house you were supposed to clean, right? So I'm getting this idea too that this duality, in part, there's something valid that is creating some sort of blockage to a degree. But really, if it was just on that one side, you could slide these out from one direction or the other, and you should be able to get them out. It's the two that's making it really held down. And that second blockage is just an excuse about that first blockage. That yeah, but I got that blockage. Where it's okay, well, your perception is actually what's allowing that blockage to have any power whatsoever. If instead of putting energy into creating another blockage for yourself by making an excuse, you put that energy into removing that blockage, there wouldn't be a blockage. I am constantly trying to keep myself accountable to not being an excuse maker, because that's something that really grinds my gears. But especially with myself, when I can literally hear myself making excuses, and I'm like, oh God, listen to me, bitch, about nothing, being lazy and trying to make an excuse for it, So we're talking about mindset. We're talking about something very, very real, but we're really talking about the mindset behind it that's giving it any power. It wouldn't have power if it weren't for the mindset. And I'm going to reflect on a reading that I just watched, a live reading, where somebody was trolling and intentionally trying to create a sense of self-doubt, more or less. That's what trolls are generally best at. And it, you know, as much as the reader used it to their benefit in order to, you know, continue to put out something educational, it still got under their skin, which is completely reasonable. I think we're all like that. And I think that, like, that's the whole point of that type of energy. But once it gets under your skin, you're giving it power. You're letting it take your power, rather, right? And sometimes, I mean, it's kind of like I'm getting that scene in The Matrix where, like, Neo's being held down and then they're putting that weird bug computer thing, that robotic bug thing that goes into his belly button. And so it's like he couldn't even fight it, right? Because he was being held down in a certain way. But, like, throughout the movie, he finds that he was actually in control, really, of that all along by making certain allowances. But he didn't know better back then. And so it's like you can't really even beat yourself up about things that you didn't know better about at a time. And beating yourself up, even if you know that you know better in a current time, but it's still getting to you, like, it's not helpful. It's already getting to you, and now you're beating yourself up about it. You're just making yourself weaker about, like, you're making it more accessible to be able to take your power. But mindset is so important, and often it does come through the experience. Sometimes you do have to go through an experience in order to be able to look back and be like, okay, now I know. Sometimes you got to go through an experience like 20 times. You know, hopefully not. Hopefully you're a little smarter than I am, a little keener, a little more responsible. You know, I say that all the time. I strive for my best as much as I possibly can. I am always striving for balance. I'm always striving to be as genuine as possible. It's something I deeply, deeply care about. I really do, and it is constantly reflected in my day-to-day life, in my history, and in who I am currently. But I consider myself to be like the baseline of what is actually best, what should be expected of the individual. When there's people that won't do even as much as I've done, it's like, because I'm not so smart. I've dedicated myself to learning. Like, that's the difference. I was born an idiot, like most of us, you know, pure, innocent, dumb as hell. And it's just taken a lot of ridiculous experience for me to come where I'm at, but to come to where I'm at. But why I'm able to stay standing and able to move forward in so many different ways is because through all of those ridiculous experiences, I've maintained a willingness to learn through them and then to apply the education that I'm receiving. It's a step process, as it always is. But literally, as I was talking about this and as I was bringing up, you know, trolls trying to bring you down, like, I literally just got a text message from somebody who, you know, is commenting on a picture of me saying, I've seen better. And it's like, okay, cool, great, good job. Okay, good, okay, then we don't have to talk, that's fine. I don't care. I don't. Like, I put myself into things as genuinely as possible. I care about people. But when they show me that they don't care about me, you're not going to hurt my feelings anymore. I'm over that. I'm over it. I've had enough people trying me, especially, you know, within the last couple of years. Like, well, I mean, I've been pretty dedicated to single life, and just trying to focus on gaining my own sense of stability since like 2017 really, I guess. So that's almost 8 years. I haven't been willing even to commit to any relationships. I wanted to, but then as we got into the nit and gritty of things, I realized that that wasn't something I was willing to commit to. So I've been very hard pressed against commitments for that entire time. Not that I don't long to be able to commit myself to an equal partner, but there's pretty sturdy specifications within that request, right? And it's not like I'm going to be out here like I had been in the past, being toxically codependent just in order to settle for second best because that's what's offering me commitment. If the right person at the right time isn't offering me the right thing, then I guess I have something else to be focusing on at that time. I'm not going to settle. And I'm learning more and more how to not settle. And so many of the things I've been through have just been to work those things out. It's not that I haven't fallen into romantic, relationships where I felt very deeply and wanted to pursue some type of commitment with somebody, but it just was never right. And I'm very thankful now to see those things. So, it doesn't bother me. Like, I really try to take, like, rejection as redirection, instead of taking it personally. No, that's a gift. Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me know how you feel. I appreciate it. Okay, we have the Ace of Pentacles in the upright. Beautiful. It almost looks like the Wheel of Fortune. It is the Ace of Pentacles. And it's funny because, like, the Ace of Pentacles energy is kind of what I assume would fall in with the Wheel of Fortune, but really the Wheel of Fortune often is just depictive of karmic cycles, where the Ace of Pentacles is depictive of abundance, maybe even a cycle of abundance. Really, it's a pentacle, but yeah, some sort of divine abundance. It's called the Lord of the Root of the Powers of Earth. The Lord of the Root of the Powers of Earth. It makes me think like the love of money is the root of all evil, right? The love of money being not just the capacity to be able to obtain and use it to one's own benefit, but to love it, to crave it, to desire it, to identify oneself by it, to value it, as to value it itself as something. When money isn't anything, it's just numbers, it's just paper, it's just, it's bullshit. It's nothing. It's something we add value to. Our power to add that value and then to receive that value from it is really what the power of money is. So when you love money, you're actually displacing the concept of your own personal power into something that would not have power had you not given it to it. And people do that. Like, people that love money, they just keep putting more and more and more and more love into that money in order to try to give it more and more power. And as far as the matrix in which we exist in is concerned, that power serves a purpose. Like, that's what the whole thing is established on, really, which is quite unfortunate. But at the same time, that's part of the system. That's the point, is so that you can almost recognize if it's based off of this concept. I know that it's an illusion. I know it's not something trustworthy. I know that it's just a castle in the sand. So it's kind of giving me those vibes to a degree, except that the Ace of Pentacles generally, in the regular Rider-Waite Tarot, like, also has just this, and it's here too, the depiction of the divine hand bringing in this pentacle. And there is all these different forms of abundance here. That cross is like the Templar's cross? Is that right? The Templar's cross? It's something like that. It's very Jesuity. That's yeah. And being a winged disc, sun disc, with that, it's like it's talking about the root of the powers of earth. I mean, that symbol might as well just be that. It's also in the middle of the pentacle, only the middle of the pentacle has caps on it and is white. And then, as you can see, these, what is it, 8, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? 5, 10, 12, yeah. The 12 spokes, essentially, that are, I guess, spokes that are on this pentacle are weaved together. This interwovenness. Right. Okay. So again, the same thing that's been coming up in my last couple readings has been, at least for me, a deeply personal reflection, but I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure others can relate. Because I'm an oracle reader, pretty much everything I'm going to read is going to be coming from my own personal bias and experiences, and then just pulled from that. It's just my opinion, it's just my bias, and it's whatever you can take from it. I'm helping you become an oracle, right? Essentially. That's the point. So what I'm getting from these two cards together is that we're talking about one's concept of money and how we make excuses for that. And it takes on a multiplicity. Like, it's not just a duality, it takes on this multiplicity where everything's bothing. Everything is moving in and out of itself. The excuse for it is, one, like, well, I need money, I need to work for it. You know, like, money is what's going to pay my bills, right? And then two is like, okay, but I know better than to sell myself to money. So instead, I take on this concept that it's about the energy that I put into making that money that's really the value of things. And that way I can determine how it is I'm going to go about making money, right? But then there's, in that, like, in the integrity, there's certain things I'm not willing to sell myself for or to in order to make money, even if it were, I could so easily pay 5 times my bills easily, right off the bat, first month doing porn. I just don't feel it in my soul. I feel it in other parts of me, but not in my soul. And, you know, there's a reason that I'm always feeling this push against it. And it's not that, like, I mean, I am a highly sexual person. I can apply my sexuality into everything that I do in a healthy way. I just think that selling my sex ends up not being a healthy way. And so I tend to, like, go about things in a very specific way when it comes to my sexuality that way. I'm not opposed to, as a woman, benefiting from the privilege that I have to be able to meet my needs because of my sexuality, but I'm also not just trying to be out here prostituting myself. Like, it still is this very fine line for me, but that's because there's always this bothing of everything, right? So, you know, I have this idea of working hard to get my pay, like working for a living. And the fact, like, because if I knew that everything that I have was afforded by spreading my butt cheeks, I make jokes about it, but that's not how I afford things. I afford things because I'm a caregiver, and because I'm a maid, and because I've done landscaping, and because I've done difficult jobs that not everybody's willing to do, and I've dedicated myself to them, and I've done an extremely good job at them, and I have gotten myself into the positions that I've gotten myself into. Every time. That's how I have survived. And that's because when I have things, I can look at it and be like, proud of them. When I look at the things I have and the things I've chosen to spend my money on, you know, in any degree, like, it doesn't feel like, because, like, if I had to sell my body in order to keep a roof over my head, every time that I questioned if I was going to keep that roof over my head, I would immediately be like, oh, so now I got to sell my body again. It'd constantly feel like selling my body. And I just don't, I'd rather, now, granted, landscaping is selling my body, right? Like, that's some physical labor. That shit is it's good. But it's like getting paid to work out. And also there's just the reward. There's so much different reward to it because there's also a pride that comes with those things. And maybe those things are tied into some sort of social construct and concept of a woman's innate value. Those are the things I'm constantly trying to work out and work through. You know, the value of money, the value of myself in comparison to money, the value of my sexuality as a woman, the value of myself as an individual that just happens to be a woman. The capacity to be able to work and maintain certain things a certain way, the desire to not be enslaved to certain systems, or to support unsustainable systems in that way, and all the things that fall into it. Most of the jobs that I've had, I've ended up leaving either because I had to move because of wherever I was living at the time, or because I haven't agreed with ultimately what the job was supporting and sustaining as far as the system is concerned. My friend Ian recently reminded me that, well, he didn't remind me, he pointed out to me that the reason that I've been in so many dangerous, unhealthy, wild situations in my personal life, particularly in my home life, and my work life, is likely because I have this tendency to find spaces to live and places to work off of like Craigslist and Facebook. Yeah, and he's not wrong. I have been doing that forever. Literally forever. I mean, I've worked jobs where I went in and applied at the place, or I've used Indeed plenty of times. But it's like half of that time that I'm doing that, I'm also like, then, you know, I'm using Craigslist or Facebook for the place that I live. So now I have a solid, dedicated job that like I'm paying taxes for, you know what I mean? Like it's something legitimate that way. But then like my house, I'm living with somebody who's like an actual threat to my safety and security. Or I'm living in a place that's very secure, but then I'm working some crazy job that's, you know, covering bills to a certain thing, but then slowly moving to a point where I'm having to sell my soul for it, which I'm not going to do. And so I'm working out, balancing all of these things out. And a big reflection of that is that it's so much about this mindset. Yes, it's difficult as a single woman without the support of her family or without, you know, a partner. Like I know so many women. I know so many men and women my age, like between 25 and even 45, who use their family for support. Their families cover some of their bills. Their families make sure that they aren't homeless. Their families, like, you know, are there for them more, like, morally, emotionally. When they're struggling, they have somebody to go talk to that they know cares. Even if they don't always get along, they know these people actually genuinely care for them and for their best interests, and that those people are willing to kind of put aside their opinion in order to offer that person just genuine love and care. And I know I've seen at least a lot of women that don't ever do anything by themselves. They require a partner to survive. And I think that having a family that you can, you know, having a family or even a partner that you can trust and that cares for you is a wonderful, incredible privilege and blessing. But I don't have that privilege. And when it comes to partnerships, I'm not going to give in to being codependent. And I believe that it's very easy to slip into a toxic codependency if you're looking for support and care from someone else. you know, give it to yourself, maintain that for yourself, and then the right person who's doing that for themselves can come along, and you both will be in the same place. You'll both be coming from the same mindset and coming from the same end goal. And then you can bond and bind to each other without it being toxic. But like in my family's case, like any movement in their direction would be a compromise of my own self, not just my own integrity, but my own safety and security. So unfortunately, I don't have that from them. You know, and I've even my extended family, like, you know, I've in times tried to reach out to, and then just found that it's kind of a systematic thing within my family, which is understandable, because it's an inherited curse that just gets passed down, you know. But it is unfortunate. At the same time, like, I consider it a privilege to be in that situation, for the fact that I've been able to move out of it, and truly become, like I said, like I'm like the base of where I think most people, I would like to see most people in order to, you know, establish an actual sustainable future. I'm not the best at anything. I'm not super great. But in comparison to the debauchery, and to the degradation, and to the deflection, and to the just like carelessness, depression, sabotage left and right from the average person in the modern society, modern world, I'm quite proud of where I am. And I really care to help people, like, because people compliment me all the time about shit, and it's like, if you can look up to me at all, like, that's not beyond you. Like, let me teach you how to get to where I'm at. If you're literally admiring it in me, why wouldn't you want to be there? Because you think it's hard. Well, let me show you that it's not as hard as you think, and that even when it is as hard as you think, it's worth it. So I care about these things, but like, ultimately, like, I still do have mindsets that are holding me back, as we all do. You know, we're all doing this work together, but it's about being able to, like, look into that mirror, that black mirror, looking into the dark mirror that shows us our shadows, and being able to find yourself there, and being willing to look at yourself, and being willing to really see those things for what they are, and then being able to come back to yourself and say, okay, I can remove these things, because I see now that it's a mindset, but there's a process to it, right? But again, we're also talking about just like our concepts of money, how we're using it, how we're making it, what those things really mean, you know. Okay. And then we have the Hierophant in reverse, the Magus of the Eternal Gods. I don't know how well you can see that at all, but it's in the reverse. And I've had this card once before, and when I had seen it, it reminds me of a very specific scene in the movie, The Holy Mountain, where the main character, who's like a fucked up Jesus, essentially, I can relate, goes to the Magus, and he is the Hierophant. He's a high priest of some sort, but yeah, he's the Hierophant, and he goes to him, he goes to him because it's his destiny. But what the Hierophant is to do is to essentially put this guy through the refining fire, in order to alchemize his core being into something pure. And the point of that kind of is that, like, unless your core is pure, when your core is pure, you can go through shit and you don't take it into you the same sort of way. You generally are able to purify it. And even if you take it into you, it's not adding on to a pile of shit. It's its own shit. So when you go into your inner reflections, you can recognize it for exactly what it is. You don't have to dig through a pile of shit to find it. It is what it is right on the surface, and you're able to clean it very easily. So you're not letting those things pile up, and you're not letting those things become toxic. You know, you can have a Red Bull every once in a while as long as you drink a lot of water, and it won't fuck your system up. But if you're drinking Red Bull all day, every day, I can tell you from experience that you're asking for it. My friend at 24? She was 26 maybe, gave herself a heart condition on Red Bull because we thought it was funny. We thought it was funny to Red Bull all day long, and we would compete to see who drank more Red Bull that day, every day. And we were working, we were working. She was working as an engineer, and I was working pushing carts. So we would just, they're both physical jobs, and we were just Red Bulling it. It's essentially crack in a can. I've never done crack, but I've done Red Bull, and I feel like they're pretty close, I assume, from what I've seen of people on crack. And yeah, it'll fuck you up. It'll fuck you up. But if you're, a little bit of toxic here and there, it doesn't create a toxic system. It's, the world is toxic. It's hard to not fall into little bits of toxicity here and there. But, it's about not letting those things pile up. It's about constantly keeping that inventory with yourself. It's about constantly being willing to go back in through that mirror in order to truly see yourself, and in order to recognize, what is good for you and what isn't, and to release what isn't, and to embrace what is. And, it's a constant process, right? And that's also what's being displayed here too, is much like that dude in Baltimore. I don't know if there's a video series I did on that, but he was trying to create a perpetual motion engine. And that's kind of the concept, right? Is recreating Tesla's free energy concept, which is still classified, I believe, even though the CIA has all of his work from after he died. Okay, well, nobody that close to the CIA dies naturally. Not when they're trying to produce free energy to create a sustainable system, because that would go against the developmental AI overlords that are trying to replicate us in their image. Can't do that. This is the Matrix, idiot. What are you doing? Why are you trying to save people out of the Matrix? And it's funny because if you watch the entire Matrix series too, it kind of folds in on itself, where the idea is that the Matrix actually is the preferred living, because the Matrix, although not real, although it is an illusion, that illusion is what makes life worth living, because everything outside of the Matrix in the real world is desolate and desperate and awful. Everybody's suffering, where in the Matrix people are completely unaware of their own suffering, Now, do I think that that's a psyop? Probably. If I know anything about the way that Hollywood generally tends to work. And then the fact, after the movies came out, the two directors that made the movie, the writer and director, the two directors that made the movie, or the two writers of the movie, fully transitioned their genders, which, is something separate, and I'm not trying to demonize it, but it says something about the concepts that were being instilled into the Matrix, for the fact that, if they would have transitioned prior to making the Matrix, that would have said something different, and that would have said something more. But if they were already struggling with this sense of the genuine self, and then after the Matrix, they went into they embraced the Matrix. You know, that transitioning was like a form of that, in the way where it was like, actually, it's better to, you know, Neo in the first one had been seen as somebody that was supposed to like break the Matrix and rise above it and help everybody else rise out of it, in order to control it, in order to make it something more sustainable. But by the end of the series, like, essentially that whole concept's kind of done away with, because the fighting, the agents has become monotonous, and they've broken into the real world, where they realize that everything is so desolate that, like, it becomes quite overwhelming, and this constantly trying to balance between the one and the other is just, is it even worth it? And then it like keeps pushing that concept, like, is it worth it? What's really worth it? Just being happy is the greatest thing, and that's why we created the Matrix in the first place, and it actually was serving us, because that illusion of happiness was something that we could cling to, where in the real world there isn't any actual happiness and there's nothing to cling to. I disagree. I loved the first one. Once I had been forced to study the entire series, it kind of made me feel some type of ways. But that was part of it too. I mean, it almost was, like trying to drive me to accept an identity that I had crafted for myself, and to let that speak for me, when like innately, really, at least where I'm at right now, even still, is to let those things speak for themselves. I wasn't allowed my own personal identity growing up, to a lot of degrees. To a lot of degrees I was allowed, but that allowance was really its own limitation, right? So I didn't know myself, but I feel like that was a benefit, because as I became an adult, I realized that so many of those ways that I would have determined otherwise were self-expressions, were actually self-limitations, because that's not who I really am. Like, I was always really into the alternative style. I love it. That's fine. But like, had I had gone that route, I would have been getting piercings and tattoos and all these different things that would have really changed my appearance in a way that made me definable one way, where what I very much like is to be able to just look natural and then have that speak for itself. Because people have all these assumptions about like the type of person I am, the type of person anybody is, based on their appearance, right? But if I was covered in tattoos and had dreadlocks and had big old gauges and, you know, like tons of piercings and stuff like that, and maybe even tattoo my eyes or whatever, wearing contacts and dressing super crazy goth all the time, which I'm into. I am into. I love when people do that. But like, there's just this innateness in that, where like suddenly people be like, okay, oh, so you're evil. And then when they find out that you're actually light, then they're like, oh, so you're just, you know, you're like a play on words. Like it still takes on such a definitive thing, where I don't particularly have anything super definitive about me that way. I still like wearing fishnets and dresses and, you know, boots and like my nails, like stuff like that. I like doing all that stuff. Sometimes I wear lipstick and, you know, big old wing, not big, but like I wing my eyeliner and stuff like that. Like, I'll do that stuff. I never do anything too extreme, really, but I'll do those things, and I like that, and I like expressing myself through those types of things. But I also like that, like, I can change that the next day. I can change that very day. In 5 minutes, I could just be back to like this person that isn't definable. Like, because this person is free to be literally anything at any given time. You know, my tattoos would have been a reflection of me at a very particular moment in time, but they're permanent, so there would have been this constant reflection of those things. And I'm thankful for that. I mean, the dude in Baltimore, when I first met him, had a tattoo across his neck that said, "Forever Alone," because his wife had left him, and he was depressed, and so he felt like he was never going to find a partner. you know, that loved him or understood him. And so he got that tattoo. And it was kind of like a cop-out, because then he was like not going to be given to any sort of commitments, which I can relate. I get it. But because I got it, like that was the thing, when we were together, we weren't romantically involved truly, because he was hard-pressed against that, and I wasn't fully for it. I was just codependent. And so the process that we went through too was like breaking my codependency, which is great. I needed it. But it also helped him to find that he could be understood and could be loved, even if it didn't need to have those commitments attached to it. Now, mind you, this guy was a bit off his rocker. I don't think he ever had a rocker to begin with. I showed up after work one day, and because he wasn't working, I showed up after work one day, and he had spent hours using salt to scrub this tattoo off of his neck. And so when I got home, he's wearing a white t-shirt that literally is just like, he's just covered in blood. Just blood everywhere, all over his neck. It looked like he had slit his throat almost to a set for a minute until it looked like really, really, really bad rug burn. But he had straight up rubbed the top layer of skin off. And then he let that heal, and then later did it one more time, and then let that heal, and it all but entirely faded that tattoo, where you really couldn't even notice that he had it until you were like really looking, and then it's like, did you have a tattoo there? But he basically erased the tattoo that way. He had looked it up online, found that it was a thing. I can't say that I'd recommend it, but he did do it. If you're really badass, I suppose that you can handle it and do it. But I remember that being traumatizing for me to see, especially because he didn't even say anything. He just walks up and he's just covered in blood across his throat. Then he explained that he had rubbed the tattoo off, and I remember like feeling his grief, because I think like the whole time, like I think the pain he let himself feel in doing that, like he was also like in this state of releasing. So it was really emotional, but it benefited him in the end. And I just remember it being like, yeah, I'm so thankful I didn't ever get any of the tattoos I wanted. You know, in the future, when I'm in my 50s or 60s, if I live that long, like maybe I'll get tattoos then. I'm not opposed to them at all. I think they're beautiful. I would love to be covered in tattoos. I think that art, skin art, I love drawing on myself. Like I love having art on my body. I do think that it's beautiful. I just know that like had I ever gotten the tattoos that I wanted, I would have regretted them. And I would have, like, I changed so much. I love being able to change so much. I love having that freedom. And that's part of like, that's, you know, we're moving, but this is in the reverse. And so I'm almost seeing like, okay, this mattress is creating a perpetual motion machine. It's an alchemical system of purification in order to create the most sustainable being. It's two towers, right, on either side that have, you know, different forms of power going into them. One is the triune, and it's kind of like theology, and one is the pentagram, with like the sense of humanism, hedonism, the balance between these things. And we have the masculine, it's the feminine though, okay. So we have the masculine in the feminine position and the feminine in the masculine position, which I was just talking about the other day, is where you get toxic femininity and toxic masculinity. Empowered masculines don't have to put down a feminine, nor do they have to overcompensate for the masculinity. They can simply be, and they are masculine. The same for an empowered feminine. But a toxic masculine has to overcompensate for its masculinity because it's actually in the feminine position. And a toxic feminine has to overcompensate for her femininity because she's actually in the masculine position. I shouldn't say she, because we're talking about the divine aspects of an individual who has both. And that is a core issue of mine that I do struggle with, is being toxic in my gender, in my divine orientation of the genders that way. My balance isn't ever likely to look exactly like the tradition, but because we're all very different and those things are all varied and have different levels, and that's what the beauty of it. But I can recognize that I still have toxic concepts, and those have also been limiting me in the same way that these towers in the reverse, you know, it's talking about insustainability, it's talking about toxicity, and these two, the toxicity of those things are what's blocking. But this is cool because what it's doing is revealing part of the power of that blockage, which is that these are in the reverse. If these were upright, they actually look even more like the blockages. So maybe in the reverse, we're talking about them serving a purpose this way. And that's where this balance is coming from. You know, thankfully we have the Ace of Pentacles in the middle to create a sense of all of this working out for the greatest good, the Lord of the root of the powers of the earth. Okay, let's can I just have one more clarification, or a little bit more clarification for the Ace of Pentacles, please? Thank you. Okay. So, like this. The Princess of Cups. The Princess of the Palace of the Floods. If you can see that, it's like a mermaid. And it came out on its side. Well, it came out one way, but then turned onto its side, so I have to accept that. There's a porpoise, a swan, a sea turtle. There's two swans. There's a lotus. There's two lotuses, a sunflower, a sea turtle, a porpoise, and two swans. And it's interesting because essentially she's giving me these mermaid vibes. Being the princess of the palace of the floods, she's in the water. You know, and like just because she's topless. But it almost looks like, I mean, she has a belt. I don't know if you can see this. She has a belt on, as if her fins are belted on, right? She's like one of those fake mermaids. She's not a real mermaid. This is just a tail she's put on in order to serve this purpose. Okay, so that's perfect. That's perfect, because yes. The inverse of the proper masculine and feminine that I have taken on in my own self, it's come, you know, from example. I had toxic mom and stepdad, so my ideas of those things were toxic. However, there was like this deeper aspect in my emotions and intuition, in my own personal power. All of these, and the fact that there's two lotuses too, but like all of these symbols are symbols of personal power, of intuition, of connection to a deeper source, of some sort of commitment to oneself. The lotus has to grow through mud and grow up in the darkness in order to become what it is. And so it's like taking those things, strapping them onto myself. It's kind of almost like, remember like how Ariel, The Little Mermaid, was my favorite when I was tiny. And because it was pornographic, to be clear. Yeah, I was a messed up kid. But she, even though she was a mermaid, she longed to be able to walk on two legs, on her own 2 feet. She didn't even have 2 feet. But it's almost this idea where it's like underneath the surface of what she's strapped to herself in order to survive this environment, she does actually have 2 feet. But now I'm getting that idea of walking on your own 2 feet can also be these two blockages, in the sense that she was a mermaid. She sold her soul to be able to get that power. She's well, not her soul. She trapped her soul. She sold her voice. She sold her voice to be able to get that power. And in doing so, she also had to deny the entire environment in which she grew up. She left all of her friends. She left all of those closest to her. And she left her family. And she went, up where they walk and up where they run. And up where they stay all day in the sun. Based on these fantastical concepts she had of humanity, which is always so precious when you're watching the movie, because it's like, oh, it's cute. She finds value in all of these things that we're constantly taking advantage of every day without even appreciating. But at the same time, like, that speaks on the state of her delusion of the value. It was like a delusion of grandeur, right? Where she's putting this inherent value on being human because she's dissatisfied with being a mermaid, and that in contrast seemed to hold so much value. So there's like a warning there. But with her having her fins strapped on in this image, it's like that was actually, because part of the thing, and like especially in the second one, I think maybe it's in the first one, it's like trying to find her mom, trying to find her lineage, or her heritage, trying to find her divine inheritance in a way. And it's almost like, because she has this deep knowledge that like she isn't actually meant for this world. She's meant for something greater. And what she ends up doing in the second movie, she becomes, I loved Little Mermaid, she ends up becoming kind of like an ambassador. She's literally the ambassador between the ocean world and the world of the land. She brings those two parts of the world together to create a balanced world. And that's why we have the porpoise and the sea turtle, but we also have 2 swans. We have a sunflower, but we also have the 2 lotuses. There's this balance of earth and sea. And it is out under the Ace of Pentacles. So although it's to a degree denoting, these warnings to just be conscious of one's own personal blockages with these desires, and also to, recognize that these desires are coming from a place of toxicity, we also have, oh no, they're both earth. Which one is water, though? I think that is water. We have water and air. Yeah. Water and air. water and air. One's emotions and theology or intellect. You know, ultimately, all of these wands can be used to our benefit and our betterment, but you have to know what it is that they are first. You have to be able to call something out by name. You have to be accurate with your definitions of things. Otherwise, you're creating unsustainable systems. You're putting power into something that isn't legitimate. You know, so I think this in the reverse is also reflective of that. Like, you're not going to build a perpetual motion machine if what you're putting into it is unsustainable theology. Even if you've got yourself perfectly aligned, if you're still questioning and trying to force these concepts, it isn't going to end up the way that you would want it to. You have to go with the flow. You have to recognize that you yourself are the balance of those things. And largely in part, not because you even are innately, so it's not something to take so personal. She has her fins strapped on. She's not even a real mermaid. But she's fulfilling a role in order to bring balance. And it's right under the Ace of Pentacles. So as we go back into talking about these blockages and our concept of money, it's like, keep to yourself your integrity. Keep to yourself your integrity so that you do not sell your soul. But be willing to strap on those fins in order to serve a purpose, a greater purpose, because, sorry, I just got a text. Be willing to strap those things on to serve a greater purpose, because that's ultimately what is affiliated with the Ace of Pentacles. That's how you're gonna balance out these things. Be cautious of the warnings. Be aware of the turbulation that can come with the toxicities. But balance yourself out. Trust yourself. Trust the divine working through you for your own abundance and for the abundance of all. Because we're bringing two worlds together. All right. Well, that's what I got. It resonates with me for sure. It always does. Hopefully it resonates with you too. Like I said, that's the whole point of Oracle. You know, I'm not doing tarot in the sense that I'm like telling you, I'm not going to sit here and tell you like what your crush thinks about you or if you're going to win the lottery. I don't use it that way. I just use it to stabilize talking points. And in that process, I am also teaching you to be able to receive your own talking points from those things. And hopefully that does serve you that way, to help you get into alignment with your highest power, to just be able to reflect on things. You don't ever have to agree with anything that I say. In fact, often I think that it's the disagreement that will lead to a proper analyzation, personal analyzation of the things that I say. So, yeah, I hope that this was a blessing to you. And I hope that, whatever day of the week, whatever time of the week, whatever it is for you, that it's good for you, that you're blessed, that you hold true to yourself, and enough that you can actually open yourself up to the abundance of the universe. And I will see you soon.